Hi, Bill Vales here, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new show that we've been working on at LCTV. The name of the show is Your Backyard. And on Your Backyard, we're going to take you through all the conservation trails that are in Littleton. And our guide for this is going to be the Guide to Conservation Land of Littleton, Mass. And this book was put out by the Littleton Conservation Trust, written by Art Lazarus, a longtime Littleton resident and geologist. We're very excited about this show, and we'd like you to sit back, relax, and let's see where your backyard takes you today. Well, here we are at another edition of Your Backyard, and we're at the Cobb property, which is off of Pickard Lane near the Acton border. And I'm really looking forward to walking this property. It goes by some water, which is always a good place to find birds and wildlife. And this looks like a very interesting place. We were greeted here, I'm looking up here, and we're being greeted by a American robin, one of my favorite birds, so that has to be a good omen. So join me down as we go through Cobb Lane. Get my stuff. Get my map. Here we go. Okay, there is a sign for the Cobb footpath, but it's somewhat challenging to find. Show you this sign. Take this branch out of the way. Ta-da! Cobb Memorial Footpath. Okay. So this wasn't obvious for me to find when I'm at the cul-de-sac on Pickard Lane, but it is there, and that does tell us that we're in the right area. Okay. As we immediately start up the trail forks, and we see two trail designations. One's for the Cobb Trail, or the Cobb Memorial Footpath, and the other trail is for the Yap Trail. Now, there's several pieces of conservation land that are joined together because they're adjacent, quite frankly, and trail systems have been built to join up the systems. And this larger area is known as the Neshoba Woodlands. Now today we're going to be venturing down the Cobb Trail, which is denoted by red dots. We'll see some metal red placards. And some other time we're going to do the Yap Trail, but for today we're going to be on the Cobb Trail. So here we go. I'd like to make mention of this particular trail indications, and this is something that I learned about with one of the conservation land trustees about how they set these marks. And you'll notice that this nail is not going all the way into the tree, okay? And that's very important because that gives some room for growth of the tree without it being restricted by the nail or what the nail is holding. Now, in the past, a number of trails, and you may still find them today, in fact you will, are designated with paint marks on them. But more and more trails are using metal indicators, and you'll see it's not that they didn't have the power to drive this nail in all the way. This is the proper way to set a metal trail marker. So don't help it along by picking up a rock and smashing it. Just leave it be, and it's actually done right for a reason. Okay, so here we go. As we proceed down the start of the trail, I'm struck by how high the forest canopy is, and this is just at the beginning. I see a lot of white pines here, predominantly white pine right now. Predominantly white pine. I do see some black birch, and it's a very high canopy. These pines are over 100 feet high, and we have a nice forest bed of ferns here. I believe these are cinnamon ferns, and it's just striking. And as you know from previous shows, my favorite color is green, so I love all the shades of green here. Now, something, because we're in a little lower land here, I can see over here to my right what looks a little bit mucky, swampy. That could be a bit of a vernal pool. And by vernal pool, I mean a area that holds water sometimes during the year, and other times it does not. Now, along with an area like this, such as this, comes a few bugs, which I've already been asked about by the camera crew, Mark. And no, we don't have any bug spray, but we're going to suck it up and deal with the bugs. So, now that little chipmunk there is frozen. It has not moved for 20 seconds because it knows we have not spotted him.
His heart sure is beating.
Yeah, yeah. And he's sitting on a black birch, and as I look around here, I see more and more black birch, which was mentioned in the LCTV overview. I'm sorry, the LCT Littleton Conservation Trail Guide. But there is a lot of black birch here. As I tramp through tick-infested and poison ivy, I do see poison ivy here. So I need to caution you about poison ivy. 3 leaves, and this is what it looks like here. I'm not going to touch it, I'm just going to walk through it. Okay, but there's a classic 3-leaf. Okay, it's pretty much all where I'm standing. So if you just look at where I'm standing, you're going to see poison ivy all around. But seriously, you need to be aware of ticks. And whenever we go into the woods, not just this time of year, but actually any time of year, we need to really check ourselves for ticks. Wearing light clothing helps because ticks are black. So if you wear white clothing, that can help find them. So that's a hint, but seriously, check for ticks. I've had a couple tick bites this season already, and had to dig a little to get them out, and actually take some medication just as a preventive measure, and so we need to be aware of that. Now, something I want to point out that we see on this black birch here is we see this vine climbing, and the vines they need support. okay? And this climbing vine, this is bittersweet that we see. And you can see the results of what this vine is going to do. That's going to choke that tree. Okay, that's going to choke that tree and really have a detrimental effect. Bittersweet is one of many invasive species that we have in this area, and those are species that are not necessarily indigenous to the area, but some can be indigenous to the area, but they overrun their respective populations. And what happens when one species overruns a population is we lose diversity. And having a forest environment or any sort of environment in our ecosystem that is diverse is very important for a healthy environment. So this is an example of some black birch, and also with some invasive bittersweet around it. Okay. As we walk up the trail, I notice here some trees that are hanging, that at some point they are going to fall completely to the ground under the force of gravity, maybe with the help of a strong wind, maybe with the help of a storm, or maybe just when they're ready to fall. So I mention this as a caution that when you're in the woods, look up, look out. Be aware of your surroundings, because trees such as this can do a lot of damage. Incredible amount of weight when they pick up the velocity of falling under the force of gravity. They come down hard and can do a lot of damage. So be aware of your surroundings. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a chance and walk quickly. Here we go. I see here a snake. My wife wouldn't like this snake, but there it is. Now, what gets me about this snake, oh, it is moving. I was kind of surprised that it wasn't moving, but look at this. Looks like a garter snake. He's a mere, let's see, how long would he be? A couple feet maybe? Sort of put something there. Just doing his thing. Making his living for the day, looking for some food. And these are common in the area, not just in on the Cobb Memorial Footpath, but anywhere we go in Littleton. These are very common. This right here is where tent caterpillars are bred and will fledge from. Fledge is probably not the correct word, but they will, when they're ready to leave, and I think that these may have been ready. These don't do your trees any favors, okay? So when I see them at home, I get rid of them because they do a little bit of damage. But they do fill a niche in the ecosystem, so I want to point those out to you. So those are tent caterpillars. You can see the tent. It's actually a very intricate design. Now that I look at it, I may be inclined to keep them there. Let's see. I was told to not buy the shirt with the Super Duty seal on there, but let's see. That's actually a pretty intricate design of a web, and you can feel the strength of this web. And I can also see in here what appear to be all the eggs. That has some strength. That has some strength. Along the footpath to my left as we're coming in, I noticed another vernal pool down here, and this vernal pool is holding some water, and I do see the flecks of small insect life bouncing off of this. Now, this would be a great place, I believe, to find, oh, look at over here. Look at over here. Well, what am I hearing here? I'm hearing frogs, hearing some frogs. So this vernal pool, like all vernal pools, will hold water part of the year, and other parts of the year it will dry out. Now we're in the early parts, actually late parts of spring. We're still not in summer yet. This would be, with seeing all the bugs, I'd expect to see flycatchers here. Those are birds, flycatchers, perhaps a phoebe. I'm not hearing any or seeing any now. It may speak for the lateness of the day that we're out here, even though Mark seems to think that this is early. From a bird watcher's perspective, I'd love to be out here. About 7 in the morning would be great, because that's when birds are going to do a lot of their feeding, early in the morning. Right now we're sort of at bird siesta time, but I'm going to, as he checks his watch, I may add, I am going to be on the lookout for birds, any bird sounds that I hear. But I'm going to look a little closer at this vernal pool. Psst, 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 psst. Try calling in some birds. I do hear birds behind me. Whoop, look at the frogs. Look at the size of these frogs. I don't know, right here. There he goes, there he goes. There's 2 of them. Oh, 3. I see vernal pools. You know, anywhere there is water is a great place to see wildlife. Why is that? Because wildlife is going to be looking for food, and you're going to find food around water, and it's just a great place. We're about a 1/4 of a mile in now on the Cobb Memorial Footpath, and we've come to this sign that indicates three directions, 3 options for us to take. One to Nagog Hill Road, straight up this way. One back to Pickard Lane, which is the way we came. And the 3rd way is to Neshoba Road. Now, the Cobb Memorial Path starts from the way that we were on it at Pickard Lane, and we're going to proceed through Neshoba Road. So that's the path that we're going to take. Okay, let's go. We're being watched again. I believe this is a different chipmunk. I have noticed around my yard at home that there are just a large number of chipmunks this year, and I see the holes in the ground, which is part of their system of where they store their food and where they seek shelter. And this one up here is absolutely convinced that we don't see him because he's not moving. He's frozen in this oak tree. This is a white oak tree that he's in. And again, the forest canopy here is strikingly high. These white pines certainly reach for the sky. Right off the trail here is an outcrop. And I want to check out some of the rocks here. And this looks like typical to this area. This actually looks like somewhat of a what we call a pegmatite, because I see a lot of pieces of feldspar in it. That's this white material. Pretty small grained. But this looks like a granitic, I should say, granitic outcrop. If I say granitic, that gives me a lot of slop. You know, it doesn't commit me to granite. Granitic is granite-like, which could be a range of different types of rocks. I look up here, this one piece, which looks noticeably different than all the rest. Has in it a lot of white, looks like white quartz. I see quartzite here, mica, black, which would be hornblende, and this is just typical of the type of rock that we see in Littleton and the greater Littleton area. Now, we do see some of this over Oak Hill. However, we have another type of rock over Oak Hill, which is Tadmuck Brook schist, but that's a story for another day. But I'm just going to poke around a little more. Kind of interesting. Beautiful ferns, the cinnamon ferns here, and the moss, green moss. You know, I really need to check the height of land here. So this is interesting. Now, something that I've read about this area is that there's a fault, a type of fault, I believe it's called a strike-slip fault, that extends from the, I believe it extends from the Yap property down and cuts across the Cobb Memorial Trail. And I'm wondering if this aids in the interpretation of that strike-slip fault. Well, I'm being eaten alive by bugs, but it is a beautiful day other than that. I notice over here to my right, an area of some sort of human activity in the form of clearing. I don't know if this is clearing for housing or trail clearing. Well, it's more than trail clearing, for sure. I do see an area where vehicles can come down. You can see here it's being cleared out. Now, I have seen areas where selective cutting is done in forest areas, and it can stop you in your tracks when you first see it. But to give some trees the advantage of being able to grow to a full canopy, it does require some extensive cutting of the understory. I'm not sure what's going on here. This property that I'm looking at over here is bounded by this old stone wall, one of the beautiful things that we have in New England, and in particular in Littleton. We're blessed with all these stone walls that tell us things about the past use, how boundaries were previously constructed, how the land might have been used. But I just wanted to make mention of this area that I see here. I am still struck by the high canopy of trees, lots of black birch. Here's a beautiful black birch tree here. There's really a lot of black birch, a lot of white pine. Just off the trail, I'm tempted by these large glacial erratics. And if you recall, glacial erratics are boulders that have been moved under the power of ice and dropped in a particular area. But this glacial erratic, along with where it might have been split from, has some huge These are, you know, probably a foot long, 4 inches wide of quartz, white quartz. As I looked at the quartz going over to the other side, I see on the other side, it looks a little like quartzite. Down here, this looks a little like quartzite, which makes me think that at some point this rock was under metamorphic pressure to convert the quartz into quartzite, high compressional forces. Also see feldspar, which is indicative of what we would see in gneiss. And there's a number of glacial erratics here. Behind me is a huge black birch. It has 2 branches to it. It looks like it split off when it was quite young. This branch on the right, the trunk on the right, I should say, is over 2 feet in diameter. Huge. Looks like a really healthy tree. Full canopy up on top. Wow. Nice. And I'm still not hearing any birds. So I think we're in bird siesta time, as I said earlier. I did hear a red-bellied woodpecker, which are really taking up residency in Littleton in the Northeast. So we'll keep looking. We have arrived down at Cobb Pond, and this is a beautiful pond. I've seen out here a family of wood ducks, a female wood duck leading 4, maybe 5 young. We see some beautiful lily pads there, the white flowers. There's some with yellow flowers. Actually beautiful, beautiful scene. This would be an ideal place to see warblers, various flycatchers looking for food. I see just below me here frogs galore. There are frogs all around this pool. This is not a vernal pool. This would hold water year-round, unlike the vernal pools that are seasonal. I would expect to see here great blue heron, American bittern, greenback heron, probably night heron, an array of species. This would be a great place for bird watching. We have a few of the trees are dying, probably attributed to the fact that they are now in water. And when they first sprouted up, there was no water here. This was more pasture land. And over time, the pond area has grown, and you can see some of the trees don't survive well in water. If we look behind us here, we can see here the remnants of trees that were once alive, have since died. I see all the effects of woodpeckers, various woodpeckers working these trees, looking for bugs, perhaps looking for nesting cavities. I just heard some chickadees there. I see up here on this particular tree a number of holes, and these nesting cavities, a variety of species can live in these cavities. And optimally, a particular bird likes a nesting cavity, a particular size, but while we may cut a bluebird hole when we build a box 1.5 inches wide, bluebirds really aren't all that fussy. They don't fly around with a tape measure looking for holes that are 1.5 inches wide. So holes such as we see in these trees would make a lovely home for a variety of species. Some of these can also be used by smaller owl species. You hear that bird just right there. We see, what do we see? He just came out of a nest. We see okay. I'm going to ask my cameraman to be real sharp here. I've got what looks like, this looks like a variety of flycatcher. Can you see on this tree out here at 12 o'clock to me, this is birders talk, 12 o'clock to me. If you go up the tree, perhaps 20 feet to the left, you're going to see on there a perching, oh, it just flew off. And that to me looked like some sort of flycatcher, had nice brown tail feathers on it, so it had brown tail feathers on it, little bit of a darker head, had an upright posture, and that's something important to note about the bird. Was the bird sitting like this? Was it like that? So making note of the posture. And I always find that when I find a particular bird, if I say to myself out loud, has wing stripes, circle around the eye, sitting upright, that helps me remember it. So what I will do when I get back to my house is I'm going to look at what that is, but that was some sort of flycatcher. Very interesting. And here's a beautiful, if you can catch it, dragonfly, and I've never seen wings like this. They almost look like flags. Can you see that? Well, you see behind me, beautiful view of Cobb's Pond. Absolutely beautiful. And we noticed a collection of sticks starting here and wondered if this might be some beaver activity. So we looked around, and sure enough, here's some signs of a beaver gnawing on this branch of this dead, this looks like a white pine. And right here, that's certainly some beaver activity. And I notice here, on this branch here, it looks like something is gnawing away. Here's another tree that's been cut by a beaver. So beavers are working here, doing their work, building dams. Look what we found here. We haven't touched this yet. It's a skull. It appears to be a skull of something. Let's take a look at what it is. You'll notice I'm handling this and Mark isn't. This is a skull that's gone through a bit of decay. Well, might this be a beaver skull, just looking at it? Here's where the teeth would be, coming out here. Now, this has two I'm not going to say molars, because I'm not a dentist. But this does have 1, 2, 3, 4 teeth on each side. 2 teeth in front, a place that appears that two teeth might go, the two that we think of as a beaver. You have a good shot of that? I'm going to leave this here, but what I'm going to do is what I normally do, so I can work on things back at the house, is I'm going to take a couple pictures. Of this. And I always put something next to my pictures so I'll have a sense of scale, which is always a good idea. So I use my glasses. And I'll take this in a couple locations. Oh, this is exciting. You know, other than the fact there's no body and no fur, I can almost picture a beaver on this. And I'll check out the anatomy of this when I get home, and I'll report back. We're going to put this back right here. Those teeth are neat. I'm going to take one more picture of the tooth. Great. We're going to put that back there. And only we know where that is. Boy, that smell of a swamp is just great. I really enjoy it. I just remembered the bird that I believe that I saw up here, and I think it was a great crested flycatcher. I believe that's what it is. I'm going to check on those tail markings that I saw. They actually weren't on the tail, they were on the primary feathers which come off the side. But I believe that was a great crested flycatcher, which makes a lot of sense in this habitat. A lot of sense because there's a lot of flies, a lot of dragonflies all around. This is a great place to come. Bring your bug spray, okay? Bring your bug spray. As we're walking up, I see the pathway turns to a bit of stone. And if we look down there, we see the remnants of a well. Actually, it's a fairly new well that was drilled. I don't know the history behind that. It looks like the type of well one would drill for water, perhaps for a house or some commercial use. I don't know why you would have the need for water on conservation land. However, that may have been a project that was started prior to the land being turned over to the town. I'm just not sure. So we have a stone road here, and we have a little bypass for that stone wall, and we're going to take the bypass. It's just going to take a gentle curve around the stone road and continue on. I wanted to mention that it's very easy to forget that you're in Littleton. I haven't heard any motor vehicles, and it just is striking. Look at these beautiful cinnamon ferns, quite large. Look at the blade. This part of the fern is known as the blade, and look at the size of these ferns. These are huge. We're on the Stone Road bypass, and the bypass is labeled with blue. Okay, so we originally started on red, and this little bypass road is, a bypass trail is in blue. Absolutely delightful, green, buggy, area, but delightful. The bug bites will go away. This is just a delightful place. As we approach the end of the Cobb Memorial Trail, we see a beautiful footbridge here. And this footbridge was built in 2005 by Jeffrey Gailey, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which was his Eagle Scout project. And this bridge is well done, Jeffrey. Very solid, gets us over a mucky area. And you know, the beautiful thing about these bridges is they only provide a couple feet of height, but it absolutely makes a difference in the aesthetics and being able to view the area. This is very nice, very solid. Well, we're now approaching the end of the Cobb Memorial Footpath. And if you recall, we started on Pickard Lane, and we're finishing up here on Neshoba Road. And what a delightful area. You forget that you're in Littleton. You forget you're really anywhere where there's civilization. I should say here on Neshoba Road, you have a very spacious parking area that if you decide to start from this way, that's great. You have a lot of area to park, but there was also ample parking back on the cul-de-sac that we started at. An interesting thing I'd like to say, when we started this, Mark Crory, who's the videographer and executive director of LCTV, his father and grandparents, oh, do we hear that? Pileated woodpecker, great. Mark's father grew up on Cobb Lane, and we saw the house that he grew up in. It took a little while to recognize that, and Mark had to sort of resync his memories of where his father grew up and his grandparents. His father spent his young life growing up in that house, and I suspect that brought back a lot of great memories for Mark. I have to say, I saw one of the most beautiful trees in that yard, a copper beech tree, an extremely mature copper beech that Mark has been assigned the project to look through old albums to see if he has any pictures of that beech tree. But this has been a delightful walk, and we have the advantage now that we can walk back, and whenever you walk back on the same trail, it's like a completely different hike because you're going to see a lot of different things. So thank you very much for joining us on this version of Your Backyard, and I look forward to seeing you again.